Do you like point-and-click adventure games with retro pixel art graphics? Well, I certainly do, and that's why I'm making my own in Adventure Games Studio. On this channel, you can find previous videos on the creation of the first images, the main character walk cycle, and how I improved the user interface with custom scripts. However, it's been a while since I made a new video on the game, so today I want to give you another update. I will show you how far I am with story, characters, and plot, but without any spoilers, of course, the dialogue system, another small update on the user interface, and then we will take a deep dive into how I used some custom scripting to improve the walking behavior of the player character when transitioning from one room to the next. So how's the game progressing overall? Well, it is progressing, but I'm doing it as a solo project in my free time while also running this channel and having a full-time job, so naturally things are going a bit slower. However, I'm still happy with the progress I made, especially on the overall story, the main characters, and the plot. Initially, I was going for a more cozy setting and vibe, but over time the game has, at least on paper, grown more into a thriller and drama story. I have also created some first puzzles that match the setting, but there's still a lot to do on that front. But all the main characters have detailed background stories now, and I have created character sprites for each of them. The main character, who goes by the name of Jack by the way, also got a slightly upgraded walk cycle, but it's still work in progress. I will not reveal all characters at this early stage, but here is one that I can already show to you. Meet Liam, the local sheriff. Regarding the dialogue system of my game, I have used a conversation between Jack and Liam that happens early on in the game as an example to figure out how I want to display the multiple choice options on screen. As you can see, I went for a classical solution where all dialogue options are shown at the bottom as text with a transparent background, so that the image of the scene is still shown behind it. And after playing around with different fonts for a bit, I'm now quite happy with how it looks, I must say. Regarding the content of the first dialogue, I let some people actually play test it, which was very useful because it turned out that the first version of the dialogue felt a bit lengthy and it had too many redundant parts in the conversation. So I cut out those parts and rearranged things a bit, and now it has a much better flow. Regarding locations, or rooms as AGS calls them, the first couple of locations I had already created in much detail to find the overall look of my game. And for some of those images you can find time-lapse videos with and without commentary on this channel. However, I decided that this is not a feasible workflow to proceed with if I want to work on the puzzles and gameplay elements in parallel. I want to be able to try out the puzzles and let people playtest them as early as possible, so I decided to work with placeholder graphics for the locations and items for now. These placeholder graphics are really quick and dirty sketches of the final locations, literally just done in a minute or sometimes even less, just enough to capture the vibe of the location and where the walkable areas are, and with some placeholder graphics for the items and objects in them, so that those parts of the game already become playable. One thing that soon became obvious when I had those placeholder locations available is that my custom user interface items needed to be revisited. As I have shown in a previous video, I have created a backpack icon for the inventory and a notepad icon for an in-game notepad to track the player's progress, and I had placed them in the bottom left and right corners of the screen. However, with the size and positions I chose for them, they too often block parts of the screen that I would like to use for providing exits to other locations or other important hotspots in the game world. So I experimented a bit with shrinking those icons and changing their positions once more. Currently I have them both in the top right corner of the screen, but I'm not fully happy with the current situation, because I feel that these icons don't look as good anymore compared to their larger versions, and I am not yet sure about the right top corner either. I might experiment some more with increasing the icon sizes slightly again, and maybe having them at the top center of the screen. If you have any suggestions, please feel free to share them in the comments. But now let's have a closer look at my solution for transitioning between rooms. What I mean by that is this. I wanted the character to stop at a door when you examine it, but to walk visually through the door frame and out of the screen when using the door. Now, that in itself is not too difficult to achieve in AGS. My first solution for this was to have two hotspots, one for the door itself to interact with and one on the ground that acts as a trigger to make the character walk off the screen as soon as it stands on this hotspot. Letting the character visually walk through the door frame can easily be achieved without scripting, by marking one half of the door frame as a walk behind area. So far so good. But then I realized that there was a problem with that approach. When you re-enter the same room through the door from the other side, ideally I want the character to appear again somewhere in this area too. But this area now contains the hotspot that triggers it to walk off to the other room again. So using the door from the other side would just teleport you back to the room you were trying to exit in the first place. Well, one easy workaround for this is just to place the character a bit further away from that trigger hotspot. But I was not too happy with having that as a final solution, because it might not always be feasible for all types of rooms and spaces, and it just doesn't feel like a generic enough solution. So then I spotted something that I had overlooked so far. Besides hotspots, there is also a concept called regions in AGS. Regions can react to 3 types of events: walks off region, walks onto region, and while standing on region. Compared to that, hotspots only have a stands on event, so I thought that switching to regions and having those extra events available might solve the problem somehow. So my first thought was this: what if I started with the region disabled every time the room gets loaded and then enable it when walking off the region? This way, it doesn't matter if the character starts somewhere in the center of the room or enters the room through the door, because it will no longer automatically teleport back, while still being able to leave the room by walking over and off the hotspot. In theory, this sounded good, but of course it didn't work, because when the region is disabled, it doesn't trigger the walk off event either. So I needed a different approach. My second idea was this: AGS provides a function for doing stuff when the room is loading before it is visually faded in, and another function to do stuff after the room has faded in. So what if I disabled the region on room load before fade in and then enable it after fade in? I was hoping that in this case the walk onto event would not trigger, because the player would already be standing there. But this didn't work either, because apparently AGS determines a walk on event by checking if the player is not on a region in one cycle and then on the region in the next cycle. So it is not actually really related to the character walking or not. And the walk on events trigger in this case too, so this solution does not work either. So it started to become a bit of a headache at this point. The next idea I came up with was this: what if I added another region right in front of the original region, which acts as a switch to turn the original region on or off? I still think that this might actually work, but I ended up not fully testing it, because I soon realized that with this solution I do not actually gain anything from replacing hotspots with regions, because the only event I need is the stands on event, which hotspots provide already too. So the whole plan of replacing hotspots with regions to make use of the additional event types wouldn't be applicable here. Furthermore, I didn't really like the idea to essentially double the number of required hotspots or regions in the entire game just for this comparably low priority feature. So was there really no solution that keeps only one region per door while still having the desired effect by somehow making use of walk-off events of a region? Well, luckily I eventually found a way. The solution I found is to always have the region enabled at all times. This way I know for sure that I can always react to all 3 event types. But then I simply cannot use the enabled state of the region to determine whether to change rooms when the character walks onto it. So instead I decided to capture this information in a new room script variable, which I called switch room, and which is a boolean, so it is either true or false. I set it to true in the beginning when the character starts in the center of the room. When the region triggers, because the character is walking onto it, I check this variable to determine whether we actually should switch rooms. And when we do switch rooms, we set it to false. This allows the character to re-enter the room without immediately switching back again, because when re-entering the room, our switch room variable is now false, so we don't change rooms again. And in addition, I reset everything to the original state by using the walk off event and set the switch room variable back to true when we walk off the region. This works because switching rooms while standing on a region apparently does not count as walking off the region, so we can use that to our advantage here. One thing to keep in mind though is that this solution works because there's no other way to enter the room. If there were a second door through which we could re-enter the room after we left it through the original door, we would have to address this in code, for example by checking from which room we came and reset our variables accordingly. But so far I don't have this situation, so for now it finally works as I wanted with just a little bit of custom scripting. By the way, if you find customizing the default behavior of AGS interesting and you haven't seen yet how I customized the user interface for my game, check out this video next.